This is Prophet6, the family prophet, to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans. Greetings. God bless you. I have a word that I just want to share with you all today, and I want you to think about this. Leave your comments below and tell me what you think about this word. This is something that I've been looking over. You know, I look at some of the more fundamental and orthodox evangelical movements, and I'm always saying to myself, and I'm talking about not the ones that we would say are edgy or fringe, but I'm talking about the ones that they sing, they don't sing a lot, they don't dance a lot, and I'm not downing that or condoning it. I'm just saying it seems like a lot of people think that the more cerebral the religious leaders are, or the religious institutions are, and the more conservative they are, the more powerful they are, the closer they are to God in some way. And I believe there's some merit for that. But what I'd like to discuss is I see some inconsistencies. And I see some things that just don't add up too well. And I want to give you some examples. Why is it, and I want to tell you this, I know a lot of this stuff is going to sound crazy and everything to some of you all. It's going to sound like way out in left field. So I just want to throw that disclaimer out there, that warning out there. I cannot understand these things. When you look at Christianity as it stands today, I don't care the most far extreme to the most contemporary. I look at some trends that are massive among Christians. I want to name you some that I think make it impossible for you to be totally submitted to Christ. Totally. And the reason why I'm saying that phrase, because I hear some of these ministers talking about absolute surrender and total surrender and, just totally focused on God, just loving God with all their hearts and all this stuff. And I look at their parishioners. Now, they preach this, and it's real easy for them to preach this, and I want to tell you why. Because they're being supported by the tithe and the offerings and the love gifts that their parishioners give. But the problem that I have is this. I notice the Bible says you know a tree by the fruit that it bears. Let me share something with you. When you look at the word trees in the Bible, trees always represent leaders. Look in the book of Daniel. I think Daniel chapter 4 or something. Nebuchadnezzar he had a dream, and Daniel said that tree represented him, and the tree was cut down to the ground. When you go to John the Baptist, the book of Matthew, John the Baptist says, every tree that bringeth forth not good fruit shall be hewn down and cast into the fire. And he was talking about leaders, you see. And in the Psalms, David said, and they shall be like trees planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth their fruits in due season. And I believe somewhere in Revelation chapter 10 or Revelation chapter 9, the Bible talks about these two olive trees, and they represent the two witnesses. If you go over to, I think, Zechariah chapter 4, you have these same two olive trees. And they represent the New Testament and the Old Testament. But the way that they are talked about in Zechariah chapter 4, they are given some pomorphic or human qualities. With that said, I digress. I went into that a little deeper than I really wanted to. But my thing is this. If trees represent leaders, And you know a tree, Jesus said, by the fruit that it bears. Okay? So you have these parishioners under the trees. Okay? They're under the trees. They're protected by the tree. The trees are the guardians of the parishioners. And when you look at the vast majority of the people that they are the presbyteros of, the bishops of, the pastors of, the elders of, the prophets of, the apostles of, I noticed that there's a trend. No matter what denomination you look at, no matter how strict, straight-laced, fire baptized, whatever, it don't matter. And I want to name some of these trends. The vast majority of these groups, guess what? Their children are educated by the state. I do not understand that. The older I get, now I understand why it happens, but I don't understand why God's people are not having a total revival in this area, especially with these ministers and ministries that talk about absolute surrender. How can you be absolutely surrendered? And you letting Cesar train your children? I don't, absolute surrender? I don't understand that. I don't, that's just one thing. Every single denomination you know of, it's a it has 501c3 status. 501. It basically is a girlfriend of the state. Basically. I mean, when you boil it all down, the tax exempt status and all that kind of stuff, and the regulations that are involved in the 501c3 status, and to be a not-for-profit organization, it basically boils down as a mixture of church and state. Now, all the churches, the vast majority of the churches in America say they're against the mixture of church and state. But guess what? They bow down to this golden carrot that the government dangles in front of them in order to gain tax exempt status. And we saw a little dust up with this tax exempt status with the people that these big mega churches and these evangelists and so-called prophets and evangelists that are living lavishly, and now that they are investigating these guys. You see, so that's one trend. So you have the education part. By Christians having their children bow down to the state and get matriculated into being the future lovers of the state, bedfellows of the state, what they're in essence doing, what Satan is in essence doing is locking up the destiny of the church in the lives of the children. The 501c3 status, it plays the same role that the first one plays. And look at this. The vast majority of Christians don't believe in not borrowing money. Even though God says, ye shall be the lender and not the borrower. It's clear. But we said, well, that's not practical today. Yeah, it's practical. It's not practical because we're not absolutely surrendered to Christ. It's this one pastor that always preaches about absolute surrender. And I mean, he preaches about it in a fire and brimstone passion. And you would have to see this guy. I'm going to even say his name. I usually don't like to deal with personalities in my videos, but I want to say his name. His name is Stephen Lewis. Now, you talk about fire and brimstone, mean pastor, mean, very mean. I wonder, I don't think he's a Christian, but I digress. But he always preach about absolutely surrender. And he always preaches and says stuff like, well, The only person that can talk to the dead is Jesus. So whatever the devil is doing, you shouldn't be able to hear it. And so I know that the vast majority of his followers, guess what? They got loans. Their children are in public school. And if they ain't in public school, they're in private school. And I want to tell you something. There's not a big difference between public school, private school, and parochial school or Catholic schools. There's not a big difference. It's all the same thing. Whether it's Baptist, it's all the same thing. You know why? Because they're all accredited by the state. The lover. What? Do you see the conflict of church and state? They teach our children. Well, I like to say it this way. They pastor our children in grammar school. Then they go to college, and there's further pastoring of the state of our children. Then they go to the university, and there's further pastoring of the state of our children. And that's why the Barna research says that 80% of children raised in Christian homes, by the time that they finish their first semester of college, they leave whatever church they came from, and they never come back for the rest of their life. 70 to 80%. That's your window right there. They leave whatever, Baptist, Pentecostal, Seventh-day Adventist, Jewish, whatever. They never come back. They never come back. Muslim, whatever. It don't matter. Hindu, they never come back. But this was specifically about Christians. But people talk about absolute surrender. I'm totally sold out for God. I love Jesus with all my heart. And I'm looking at Christianity as we know it. Christianity as we know it in the corporate sense don't love Jesus with all his heart. It don't. It does not. Christianity as we know it does not love Christ with all its heart. It's not totally, Christianity as we know it in the corporate sense is not totally sold out for Christ. Now, I do believe, however, that there are individuals that are. I really do. Another thing, we depend on corporate America to supply all of our food. And when you read in Revelation chapter 13, it says there's going to come a day where you're not be able to buy or sell, save he that hath the mark of the beast. So we're actually setting the stage. Christians are hand in hand with Caesar, the government, and they're composing this narrative of the future of us actually getting the mark of the beast. As a matter of fact, I believe because of all these things that I've just mentioned, the monopolization of the state in the area of education, in the area of the 501c3 relationship with all the churches, in the area of health, and I didn't even mention that, health care, health maintenance, health care, and in the area of food. If you're depending basically on corporate America or corporate America, or i.e. the state, and I want to tell you something. I believe that we say that there are three branches of government. I don't believe that. I don't believe that anymore. There are four arms of the government. And we really don't like to say it, but it's the truth. You have the legislative, the executive, the judicial, and you have the Federal Reserve, the bank, the banking arm of the government. And I know that the Federal Reserve is not a part of the government, but in a way it is. When you think about it, in a way it is. When you see these banks are able to lobby the government and get all kinds of legislation created and passed, It is a form of the government, and it's the most powerful, I believe, form of the government. It actually governs all the rest of them. All the rest of those governments and the decisions that they make in those areas of government is predicated upon that which happens in the financial sector. So, how can you be totally dedicated to Christ when you can't get a house without a loan? The thought don't even come to you to get a house without a loan, a car without a loan, go to school without a loan. And I know that there are people that go to school and don't have student loans. I know that. But the vast majority of Christians do. It's a way of life. 501c3 status, healthcare. Healthcare is a huge thing. It's a huge thing. The healthcare is going to be the fulcrum that decides and promotes the eugenist agenda. It really is going to be. People, if we don't gain victory in our life in Christ over these three areas, yes, we do have to be nice Christians and say God bless you and all this kind of stuff, and leave these churchy answers on our answering service. Okay, that's all fine. Smile and all that stuff. Yeah, but I want to tell you, being totally surrendered to Christ is more than just waiting for somebody, just saying stuff like, well, if somebody spit in your face, you need to turn the other cheek. It's way deeper than that. Somebody spit in your face and you turn the other cheek, but guess what? Your whole life is weighed down with debt. Debt. Student loans, home loans, car loans. You can't grow your own food. You're caught up in the rat race. You know why people are caught up in the rat race? Because of some of these things that I've mentioned. If God's people could get free from the rat race, we would be able to take over the world. If we were really more dedicated to Christ and considered the fact of living in more simpler dwellings, driving simpler vehicles, they're operable, they're nice, they're decent, but they're paid for, we would be a lot better off, people. The devil has a strength. And I want to tell you something. Everything that I've seen that God says about sin, he says the same thing about debt. Wow. Almost everything that God says about debt, he says about sin. As a matter of fact, God categorizes sin as a debt. And that's why Jesus had to come and pay the debt with blood. And look at all Christians in debt. Oh, they believe in going to heaven. They believe they shouldn't sin and do all these things. But guess what? They don't believe they shouldn't be in debt. They don't believe they should be the head and not the tail, the lender and never the borrower. And if we're going to borrow money, we better be borrowing it from the saints, not from the government. Oh, Lord. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there, people. People talk about total surrender, but they don't bring in practical things where you can wrap your mind around it and see how to, situate your life. I think these are some very important things to pray about. Not just sin as we typically hear about it, but just in these practical things. We don't grow our own food. Christianity can't even feed itself. Hello. Christianity can't feed itself. Well, we can spiritually feed itself. Yeah. If you could spiritually feed yourself, really, you'll be able to feed yourself really naturally. Because the spiritual concept, it points right to the natural. And the natural points to the spiritual. I want to tell you something. A lot of this stuff, this gospel that I'm hearing, I don't care how strict and mean the pastor is. And fire and brimstone he is. This stuff ain't real. This gospel that we're hearing today, it ain't even real. It ain't no gospel of Jesus. It's a counterfeit of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to tell you how. You could be laden down with debt and be a good Christian. Those two things should be oxymorons. You're a good Christian, but you ain't got nothing paid for. You don't own nothing. You a slave to debt, to the bank. Lord have mercy. But you said you're a slave to the bank, but you totally sold out for God. Absolute surrender. Come on. And I want to tell you something. This pastor that I know, Stephen Lewis, that's preaching this stuff, I bet you his house ain't even paid for. I bet you his house is not paid. I bet you got a note somewhere. But he talking about absolute surrender. But it don't involve anything that's real and practical in your life. Just smiling and treating people nice. That I'm not trying to undermine that, y'all. But I'm just saying there's some more practical things that we need to take in consideration when we talk about absolute surrender and totally sold out to God. When you're in debt to the bank, that means you totally sold out to the bank. On paper and with simple arithmetic, it can be proven. This is Prophet6, family prophet to the angel of the church of the Laodiceans. God bless you. If you have any questions, call me. 815-929-1988. Bye-bye.